Welcome to the Why Not Porn webinar, presented to you jointly between three organizations, Nanny, Content Watch, as well as Brushfires and Focus on the Family. With that said, and jumping in, thank you for your patience. Daniel, please take it away.
Well, thank you for your patience, audience. And I am Jeremy Keaton, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist on staff with Focus on the Family, and glad to have you today. And I hope that Daniel will be joining us. Perhaps some audio issues there, but we have prepared some things to share with you in answer to this question: is pornography really that bad? And there are four cultural myths that we are going to address today. Pornography is fun. Pornography is harmless. Pornography is private. And pornography is freedom. And these are common ideas that you'll hear in the culture. And again, if you'll bear with me, Daniel was going to be chiming in here with some very good research and information. I'll try to cover some of the things I know that he was going to cover. And if Daniel comes online, then he will let me know and be able to jump right in. And Binoy, are you still hearing me fine? Just a test before I proceed.
Yes, thank you so much. Keep going, and we'll have Daniel, if you wouldn't mind logging back out and logging back in, and think you can join us.
Very good.
Thank
well,
you, Jeremy.
The idea that pornography is fun, this is a very common attitude in our culture, but I think we need to look further back than just pornography to understand this. It seems that sexuality is a point of life that is frequently joked about. Think about all the euphemisms we use to describe sexual organs and sexual intimacy. We probably could spend our entire hour just rattling off all the ways we describe something very basic and natural and central to our lives. And why do we do this?
Jeremy,
well,
can you hear me?
Daniel.
Well, I'm sorry, my phone cut out, but if you don't mind, I'd like to jump in on that point.
Yeah, please do. Go right ahead. Glad to have you, Daniel. Glad you're here.
Thank you. Well, I think as you were saying, why do we develop these euphemisms? And I think a lot of us have become uncomfortable, or we've grown up with a discomfort about our body parts or sexuality in general. Maybe we're told it was dirty or shameful, and we've come to hide this embarrassment with humor. And as a way of example, elbows don't really make us feel ashamed, and I can't think of one euphemism we have for the elbow. And so what you have in relating to our topic today, you have a profit-driven industry. That's the pornography industry. They're trying to make profits, and they capitalize on our unease. And that's how they protect this consumable product they create. They make it fun or funny. And if you think about it, a lot of the pornography out there we'll see in strange places like mainstream movies, where you'll see a topless or nude woman who really doesn't have any purpose in the film except to be naked. And this is a way of showing how natural it is to make sex funny. You also see Hollywood and music industry professionals talk about pornography as a routine part of their lives. They joke about it, they glamorize it, and they promote it. So, we have this cultural narrative that says pornography is funny and fun, but, we know, and you know as a clinician, that it's not just what the culture says about pornography. Users of pornography will say it's fun too, at least in the beginning.
Well, right. Daniel, I want to comment on that idea of it being fun, and as a clinician here, we know a great deal about how the brain works because of advances in medical technology and MRIs. And pornography functions much like a drug in the brain, and this is because of the incredible cocktail of adrenaline and the brain's pleasure chemical dopamine. It's activated with sexual stimulation. Well, dopamine is the thing we get in our brains when we feel fun, when we're having fun. And these are the fun chemicals that, although naturally occurring in the human system, can become manipulated, okay? And it can be used just like crack cocaine is used as a substance. And we have some research saying that the brain lights up in ways similar to pornography use as it would to crack cocaine. So listen, folks, there's no needle or injection required, but the cost of the initially fun effect is similar to an illicit drug. Users can become preoccupied with their next use due to that powerful reward system going on in the brain. Now, the casual fun then becomes a dominating felt need. And drug users, for instance, will do anything to get more drugs. And a pornography user will do what he can to get more, especially as the addiction cycle deepens and deepens. Another point worth mentioning here, Daniel, is that pornography promises something, and it promises a life of ease. Look, it's easy. It begins with the idea that sex is just recreational and always there to serve oneself. So you could say that pornography teaches the user to have it your way and have it now.
Right. I think, those are phrases we're familiar with. It sounds an awful lot like the fast food industry. You have poor quality food and a drive-through mentality, except there's really nothing natural and very little healthy about, the pseudo food served through a window. But the key point here is that food quickly gratifies our cravings. You can get it quick, even if it leaves you 50 pounds overweight. But it's also worth noting for our audience here that, food science has revealed that junk food tastes good. It tastes so good on purpose. They've identified the certain chemicals that excite our taste buds and put it into junk food. So this food product is really engineered to get us wanting to come back for more. And with pornography, we know that's absolutely the truth. Pornography is engineered to bring people back for more.
Yeah, right, Daniel. I want to say this, that pornography is not sex. Pornography is pseudo-sex. It's like empty calories with no nutritional or relational value in it. And yes, it can hit the gratification button with a quick, accessible drive-through high. But the fun is short-lived, and the consumer needs more and more to maintain the effects. So it's really just like an addiction, or it is an addiction. Then once that occurs, the fun is no longer fun once it controls you and leaves you sexually lazy and obese, if you will, to draw out our fast food analogy here.
Well, and I think another point that is important is this idea of fun. Is that for everyone? I mean, what about spouses and boyfriends and girlfriends that are in these kind of relationships where someone's using pornography?
Okay, yeah, you bring up a good point, Daniel, about the others and how they're affected, those in our lives. And pornography is so attractive to people in part because it promises sexual relief without all the hassle of another person. So, of course, these other people get run over in the process. And so the fact is, real people are grouchy and smelly, and they demand things like love and respect. And I'm being sarcastic here, but relationship is hard. But pornography is so very, very easy, or at least that's the way it's promoted, and it's always ready when you are.
Well, I think this brings us to the next cultural narrative that we mentioned in the front of the program there. Is pornography harmless, Jeremy?
Well, to build on what I said earlier about that internal drug-like crack cocaine effect coming from porn, I want to point out the unique nature of this addiction, okay? It's as comparing it to an outside foreign substance. When pornography is introduced, it sticks to the user's sexuality, okay? And you can't walk away from sexuality the way that you can walk away from an outside substance. An addict of alcohol can eventually not go into the bar. But with sex, it's part of who we are, and we want and need to lead a healthy sex life. So you can imagine how relationships are affected by pornography even after, quote, sobriety and porn use stops. Because even if a person stops using pornography actively, it is stuck to your sexuality, and they still need to keep on living sexually. So yet pornography has altered just about everything in the sexual point of reference or the sexual mental database. So with pornography, we begin to unwittingly view other human beings as objects for our own manipulation and gratification, or even worse, commodities to buy or purchase. And really, Daniel, this does, as a counselor, I see this, I work with this, it wreaks pain in human relationships, and it affects how we look for a mate or how we interact with the spouse we have or even the people we meet on the street.
Right. I think that's a good point. And again, these observations you see in the office, but research really backs it up. I found there was one study I saw. It came out in 2009 by Susan Fisk. She's a professor of psychology at Princeton University. And in her study, she found that the brain areas associated with handling tools, they lit up when her male test subjects were shown images of women in bikinis. All right, so they saw women in bikinis, and the part of the brain that is identified with using tools, that's the part that was activated, right? And in some of these men, a part of the brain, the social cognition area, didn't register any activity when they saw the women in bikinis. What that means is they really didn't have any recognition the women were human with thoughts and intentions and emotions. It was really the ultimate objectification. I mean, think of women as tools as a horrible thought, and yet this is what's happening, in the subconscious there in the brain. Another study that came out in 2007, it was published in the journal Sex Roles, it found that exposure to sexual and even semi-sexual material, not what we might consider full pornography, it's associated with stronger notions that women are sex objects or, like you said, sexual commodities.
So studies are kind of bearing this out, looking at even the brain science, telling us what is somewhat intuitive.
Absolutely.
One of the questions people ask is, Daniel, won't a little pornography spice up my love life with my girlfriend or my spouse? They might not mention pornography, but they ask questions that stem from pornography use. I've had individuals recovering and working with this and trying to kind of clean out their mind system from the effects of pornography, and they'll pose questions like, okay, so can I do action X, Y, or Z with my spouse? And they struggle to see how such an act would be degrading or harmful to a spouse, or they fail to see how pornography has written their sexual script for them, even when they're trying to get back into a quote, normative relationship in marriage. So you see, pornography plays a role in modifying our ideas and injecting a synthetic and dramatized situation into people's sexual tastes and preferences. And because it's so me-oriented, trying to reorient sex into a relational context of respect and mutual enjoyment, that can be challenging, though it is possible. So I want you to see that pornography not only addicts us, but it taints, and I believe as a counselor I see it robs what should otherwise really be a radically exclusive co-creation between spouses. And I want to say that again. It robs and injects into what should be a radically exclusive co-creation of sexuality between spouses, where they make their own sexual language without the unrealistic dramas or even abusive demands, Daniel, that are woven into much of this pornography.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Jeremy, and it's worth mentioning a little more research here. There's a Dr. Jill Manning testified before the U.S. Senate on the harms of pornography, and Dr. Manning had conducted a meta-analysis, which means she looked at all the available research on the harms of pornography, and she whittled it down to some key findings. And I'd like to share some of those, particularly here the harms to marriages that she found, and there were 6 primary harms, and I'm just going to read those off here. Increased marital distress and risk of separation and divorce, decreased marital intimacy and sexual satisfaction. There's a higher risk of infidelity. There's an increased risk of an appetite among the user of more graphic types of pornography and sexual activity, abusive sexual activity in the marriage. There's a less interest in monogamy, marriage, and children. And finally, there's an increased compulsive and addictive sexual behavior there. I think for our audience, and really anyone serious about their marriage, is not going to like any one of these impacts. You know, you mentioned the question, you know, going back about spicing up a love life. I think, you know, the thing to understand is that, yes, because of those brain chemicals, pornography can create sexual excitement. And many times that excitement can and is lacking in marriages for a number of reasons. It could be children, stress, finances, boredom. There are many reasons there. However, what the research shows is using pornography actually creates a greater distance between spouses because they're actually training their sexual and emotional senses to an image or a video and not to their spouse. So pornography doesn't create greater intimacy, it creates greater distance between people. You know, and I think it's safe to say a lack of sexual intimacy has many root causes, but I can almost guarantee the cause is not that there's no pornography in the relationship. And I've seen a number of stories and articles that said many men using pornography actually lose interest in having sexual relations with their wives altogether. And I think, you know, that's another point that we can get to in our third cultural narrative, this idea that pornography is private.
Yeah, that is another notion there, and particularly in the American culture. We like independence and freedom, and we like to make our own choices and be left alone. So this idea is that, you know, it's nobody's business but mine. That runs through society, but I want to tell you, as a clinician, as a counselor, as someone who sits with people, I know, and my heart tells me this, and your heart does too, the human reality is that we are not solo beings with no connections with others.
Well, I think if pornography had its way, we would all be isolated, though. And pornography feeds the idea that we are, you know, exclusively material or physical beings. It intentionally downplays our emotional, intellectual, and spiritual aspects to our lives. We talked about pornography being pseudo-sex. It's really quite soulless and mechanical. And I was really struck by a book called Pornland by a feminist researcher named Gail Dines. She wrote a rather simple observation. No one even looks like they're enjoying sex in pornography anymore. They're not even enjoying it. It seems more like the actions of angry robots trying to hurt one another. And that's just a horrible thought. And that's the content that's influencing so many people.
You know, if this was truly private, Daniel, I would not get so many calls here on our phone lines that Focus on the Family, where I work daily. If it was truly private, I wouldn't get so many calls about children being harmed through the inadvertent exposure. And then those children, after exposure, perpetrating, in many cases, sadly, the sex acts that they watched, and perpetrating that on a brother, a sister, a cousin, a neighbor, or even an infant in their home. And I'm sorry, I know this is not pleasant to hear, but if this is what happens, and again, if pornography was truly private, I don't think that we would be seeing this spillover, right? That's a misnomer to call it private. And I want to say this. It's dramatic, but I think it's right. Pornography is about as private as the pedophile perpetrating on the kid up the street. It's perhaps behind a closed door at the moment, but it is sure to make its way out to society at large, one way or another, and it impacts our vulnerable children. And in fact, Daniel, internet marketing of pornography has become what I want to say is the new sexual education of our youth, and that's really a horrible thing.
Well, I wish it weren't so, but again, I think that's a sad fact. You know, again, another study published not too long in Cyber Psychology and Behavior, it found that by the time they reach age 18, 93% of boys and 62% of girls had seen internet pornography. You know, some of this exposure is unintentional, which I think is a horrible thought in itself, but it is a reality for our kids. You know, the problem with this exposure, as you said, is that it is a sex educator. Pornography is teaching our children some very damaging things. Again, I mentioned Dr. Manning earlier, and she also looked at the harms to children from exposure to pornography. And again, I'd like to just read these. They're lasting negative or traumatic emotional responses. They have earlier first intercourse, which leads to a higher risk of STDs. They also learn the kind of a commoditization of sex and objectification of other people. It's like we said earlier. They also have a disinterest in marriage and family life. They have a higher risk for compulsive and addictive behavior. They also have a higher risk for sexual misinformation, leading them to believe that things like group sex or bestiality or sadomasochistic activity is common sexual activity for people when in fact it's not. And so they're really getting like you said, their sexual scripts are written for them by some really harmful misinformation here.
If we say that a picture is worth 1,000 words, I want to say that the cocktail of adrenaline and neurochemicals that are conjured in the body by pornography, they make those particular images worth 100,000 words on the brain of an impressionable child who's really naturally and innocently looking to have a sexual response to images of the human body, and they will respond to those sexual acts. And we can't bury our heads in the sand, friends. Pornography is educating our culture, and too many times directly educating our kids on the topics that you see on your screen there, that list of 7 items. And on Focus on the Family's counseling consultation line, we'll get call after call about this, and I will take some of these calls this afternoon, tomorrow, inevitably.
Well, I think, we talk about these horrific stories of children who've been exposed, acting out on other kids, and it's worth noting here for our audience not to horrify them completely. Not every child that is exposed to pornography is going to act out this way, but we can't tell, how it impacts each individual child. So we want to reduce that exposure as much as possible. But, even as horrific as some of this is, I'm going to say something shocking here. We actually should expect more of it. And I was really struck by a quote by Dr. Judith Reisman, and she spent her life studying the harms of pornography. She said that, the children that see pornography and act out its lies, they're doing what children are supposed to be doing. I know that's a very shocking statement. What she means is children are learning what is right and normal by imitating the adult culture around them. This is how kids grow up. They see what adults are doing, and they copy it. So we have a culture that has embraced pornography, or at least hasn't done enough to stop it, and they're imitating that. I think the real problem here is not with our kids, but with the adult society that's allowing this to take place.
So back to this idea of pornography being private. As a practitioner here in the real world with families every week, I just want to go on record and say I disagree. I would contend that the bedroom is the most public of private places. And what I mean by that statement is that sex and sexual mores in the community have bearing on the community. And it's a powerful part of social structure, our sexual ideas. And to say that the very sexualized world of pornography is truly private and therefore okay, really I think, Daniel, that fails to grasp these spillover effects that we're talking about here.
Right, and I think those spillover effects don't just happen in the individual or the family life. They tend to extend into the community as well. Pornography isn't just online these days. It's still out there in your community in pornography shops and pornographic bookstores. There's live pornographic shows at strip clubs and things like that taking place at massage parlors. I think we can actually make a strong case that all of this is part and parcel with pornography the way we're talking about it today. Really, all of it is part of what we might call the commercial sex industry. And these kind of real-world businesses in the community do have significant negative impacts on the communities where they exist. Even the Supreme Court has recognized that pornography and sex businesses have a harmful impact, and they've allowed communities to regulate sex businesses to reduce what they call negative secondary effects.
So, Daniel, you're saying that the government has acknowledged this. it's in the court record that there are elements of harm, and there's some legislation around this and some recognized bad effects?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I know that that's not the point of this webinar today, to talk about all the legal issues, but in the context of our question, whether pornography is private or harmless, let me read some of the documented effects of sex businesses on a community. Prostitution, spread of disease, lower property values and urban blight, pornographic litter, public nuisances, personal and property crimes, lewdness, public indecency, obscenity, drug use and drug trafficking, sexual assault and exploitation. These are all documented, and now we're learning even more that these all contribute to the problem of human trafficking. Again, that's something we don't have time to get into today, but it's worth noting.
Well, let's move quickly to that last cultural narrative, Daniel, here, that pornography is really freedom. It's free. It's our right. And let me mention a few scenarios here, and let's see if we categorize this as free. I want to say, how do you define freedom here? Just a scenario. What about the person who loves their religion and truly gives themselves to their beliefs, okay? And not for some charlatan prophet, but really genuinely a person that wants to serve in their faith and their community. Yet this person is tormented by the lack of consistency they have when they succumb to binging on porn, again, maybe even the same day as their religious worship service. And this leaves them with the challenge of internal self-loathing. They hate themselves. Thus, they're emotionally becoming numb or hopeless and unable to make a genuine relationship with someone because they're always hiding from some aspect of themselves they don't like. And so maybe they sub-exist, but they don't want to be stuck, yet they are. Is that freedom? That little profile sits in my office in various forms weekly.
Right. I think, if we look at what freedom is according to pornography, we could say it's, the complete lack of meaningful or loving relationships. We have a sense that sexuality exists only to serve my own needs and desires, no matter how twisted they might be. We have a deconstruction of the whole human person, so that you only are left with a soulless, unemotional, physical sexual robot. And finally, you have a complete inability to control your sexual desires or channel them into productive, life-giving pursuits. It's been said that America is the freest nation on earth. I think, sadly, what we see in society and what you see in the office, we're coming more and more under the shadow of a pornographic vision of freedom. It's degrading, it's destructive, it's dehumanizing, and it's enslavement.
Well, Daniel, we've kind of painted a bleak picture and sounded pretty negative here because this is a negative topic, but that's not our whole heart here. We want to talk about what we can do now because it's not, yes, pornography in our opinion and research's opinion is a dark story, but what can we offer? What can we say? What's a direction we can point in from here, Daniel?
Right. I think what we want to do, we've got information, we've got take action advice on our website, brushfiresfoundation.org, but I know that you and I want to leave our audience with a few bullet points that we can share. So why don't you lead us off with what individuals can do?
Well, for yourself, you can make a personal review of your own sexual attitudes and behaviors and, look inside, especially as parents. How do we talk to our spouse in the presence of our children? How do we comment about other people when they are dressed in certain ways or certain things might appear? What kind of messages and how do we shape a positive message to communicate to our children and to our spouses and to those around us? And what sexual attitudes do I carry that I might need some assistance with?
All right. I think part and parcel with that is you can put protections in place in your home, for your mobile media, your office environment. You want to reduce the opportunity for exposure to this material. You can choose pornography-free lodging when you travel. There are websites out that can help with that. I call this reducing your pornographic footprint, kind of playing off the carbon footprint idea of environmentalism. We can reduce our pornographic footprint through the choices we make.
And I'll say, if you do have an addiction or struggle with pornography, or even maybe sexual wounds that have kept you locked up in isolation or shame, there is real help for you. And we have counseling. We have a counseling line that you can call today to get immediate help in consultation confidentially at Focus on the Family. That number's on your screen there, and it will continue to be on your screen, 855-771-HELP, 855-771-HELP. We'd love to connect with you.
Right. I think moving on to our families, I spoke about protecting yourself. You can also protect your family, protect the household with technology, filters. Certainly encourage parents to get all kinds of media out of the bedroom, not just the TV, not just the computer, but take the cell phones away for the night, because kids can get pornography on their smartphones. Maybe even consider getting rid of cable or satellite TV, where there's a lot of softcore pornography available.
Well, the next message I'd love to say to parents, and it is intentionally speak healthy messages to your children. Teach them sexual and relational values, not just a just say no message. What are we going to say yes to that's healthy? Don't just speak about shame around sexual issues. Use the real names of the body parts, and use a guided resource. We do have resources at the end of this presentation to help you with that, to give a healthy message. If we can present health, the counterfeit will be more obvious. When we see good things, we'll know when bad things don't fit that healthy model we've been talking about with our children all along.
Right. Well, and right along with that, I mean, you want to build character in your children. So if they are exposed to something that counterfeit, you can begin instilling them the courage and the conviction to choose wisely and to make a better choice. Certainly, we'll not be able to protect our kids from everything, and using filters is a good it's a good step, but it's not the full step. And you want to, again, speak to them about the value of male and female, how to control and channel those desires that they feel, and how to learn patience and courage. And I think that's something we can all do today.
There's a lot of hurting marriages out there, and I want you to know, if this is affecting you, you can work on your marriage and get help. Take bold steps. Don't settle to just stay still and stay stuck where you are. Reach out. Get some input. We have resources on the slides at the end of this presentation to help pursue a healthy marriage, and stay tuned to the slides for that.
Sure, and I think finally, just to wrap up here, we can reach out into our community too. Speak with your friends and neighbors about the harms of pornography, and especially talk to the parents of your children's friends and classmates, and make sure their homes are safe for your children to visit, that they're in line with your values on these topics.
And I would say also that I just would encourage you to stand up for what you believe and begin to gather like-minded people around you. I've heard that community standards are not a left versus right or a conservative versus liberal issue. Our community standards are either high or low. And I think you're attending this webinar because you believe in a higher standard, and I hope we're able to serve you today, and that you'll spend some time on our websites and looking at the slides I'm about to advance for you.
Right, Jeremy, I think that's great encouragement. And just one final thought as we wrap up. Our ministry name, the Brushfires Foundation, it's taken from a quote by one of our founding fathers, Sam Adams. And he wrote that it does not take a majority to prevail, but a minority keen on setting brush fires of freedom in people's minds. And I think for our audience, we must understand, all of us must understand, we're not alone in this. And I encourage us to start lighting these brush fires of freedom together and starting today. So with that, we're going to conclude this presentation and open it up to some of the questions that I think Benoit has been gathering while we spoke.
And as we do that, I want you to pay attention to your screen as we're answering questions. I'm going to scroll through some resource slides. So you can look, take notes on things that gather your attention as we're doing the question and answers. I just want you to know some resources will be scrolling on the screen.
Well, thank you very much, Jeremy and Daniel. And we really do appreciate everyone being on board. We have a few minutes to be able to answer some of the questions that have been coming in. And we also want to give you some gifts, as you will see on the screen, from Focus on the Family, as well as Brushfire, as well as Nanny, so that you can help those loved ones around you. But the questions that have popped up already, there's one section that I'm going to start off with, and that is, how do you broach this topic? How do you bring up this topic with a loved one about the fact that he or she may have an issue with pornography? And maybe, Jeremy, with your background there in counseling, how do you even bring up this topic? How would you answer this?
Well, I would encourage, I like to use the phrase, the use of I-based language. Keep it focused on you and how this is impacting you and how you care for the individual, but rather than coming at someone and saying, you better fix this, you're going to screw up your life, you're causing problems, to come and calmly hit that pause button and calmly come to an individual and say, I am seeing something and I am feeling something that is really difficult or that I am concerned about. I'm going to be getting assistance whether you choose to or not. I hope you will come with me. So you keep it I-based and you represent yourself authentically to the individual. There are some very specific steps for confronting your spouse. If you will go to pureintimacy.org, I'm going to put some recovery resources on your screen. If you will go to pureintimacy.org, we have a article titled, My Spouse Has a Problem. You can follow some of the steps and recommendations very specifically there and use that I-based language approach of approaching someone with a moment of pause, representing how this affects you, and then begin to draw some of the expectations and boundaries that are laid out in that article. One typical thing, Binoy, that I will tell individuals is to say, are you willing to rebuild trust with me in this relationship? Because this has violated trust and it's not okay with me. Then you wait for that answer and you get help with whatever that answer is. I have very clear non-negotiable boundaries that I will coach people to put in place and see if their spouse or individual chooses to be a part of that program or those boundaries. And again, a lot more specifics through the My Spouse Has a Problem article on pureintimacy.org.
Thank you very much. There are so many questions. I'm going to distill them into aggregate groups. And Daniel, maybe you'd like to take this one. What do you say, again, if you could almost mimic, I can see this coming in from the questions, what would you say if your son tells you that he is now addicted to pornography? What do you tell him? What words would you use specifically to a child who then says, yes, he's addicted?
Right. I think that's a great question. Unfortunately, many parents have had to confront that. And I think the immediate impulse there is to react and react badly, to be angry or upset or hurt, or just to feel tremendous grief for your son. And I think Jeremy mentioned it earlier, hit that pause button. The way you handle that first, when that first opens up, the way you handle that can really impact how it goes from there. And as parents, we really want to be a trusted, safe place for our kids. We want them to come to us when they have problems, even if those are very difficult problems. So, I mean, I would almost encourage parents, if it hasn't happened, prepare yourself in advance. If you hear something shocking like this or having to do with sexual activity as they're growing up, and be sure that you can respond in love rather than respond with anger or frustration. And I think, again, setting that tone is so important in the beginning because you're going to communicate to them, A, your love for them and your support for them. And I think just acknowledging that that's a breakdown and that you're there to help them through it. I would turn to Jeremy because he's got some of the clinical experience in counseling families through that to just see what he has to offer on top of that as well.
Well, I think you're on the right track for sure. You don't want to take a shame-based approach. You want to take an approach that says, I would rather know you than not know you, and I know that took a lot of courage for you to come to me, if indeed the individual did come to you. and then say, I want to be a team with you. If you're a dad, if you can say to your son, son, I want to invite you into the world of manhood with me, and I will be a team member. Rather than saying, I'm going to tell you what to do, and you better do this, it's more of, I thank you for being brave in this area, and even if the child didn't admit it, maybe they're caught, you can still say to them, you know what, sexual curiosity is powerful. I want to invite you into the world of manhood or the world of femininity with me, the mom can say to the daughter, but I want to be a team with you. A dad can say, I have to be faithful to mom and to our family, and I want to join ranks with you. Let's do a resource reading together to talk about safety and recovery from this. I am doing this on a daily basis. I invite you to be in the game with me. And there are some sex ed resources and then recovery resources on your screen that you can interact with your teen on and get some healthy conversations started.
Thank you. I'm trying to make sure I unmute properly. We don't have much time, but there is one theme that I do want to address, and we may have to make this the last question. And again, depending on how we ran over, we were late to start. The question that comes out is hope. What hope for wives mostly, spouses? What hope is there? What can happen? Can a person get over addiction? What would you say to the person who's affected as to how they respond, how they move forward? What advice would you two give? And that may be really the only time we've got left for the question. Could you go forward with that?
Well, I don't mind jumping in there because that's a passion of mine. I want you to know one of the reasons I'm in the work that I'm in is not because of all the negativity around pornography or addiction. It's because of all the positive, redemptive stories that can come out of this. And there's people out there right now, they think, no way, no way. Pornography has cheapened life for me, and I feel like an object. My spouse is caught in it. But if you will reach out and get some help, do not try to go this alone. That is the main key for starters. So I would point people to the pureintimacy.org website, find the article titled The Individual Approach to Recovery, and it will explain why doing this alone is not advisable and rarely successful. You need assistance from a trusted, compassionate guide. A professional is especially helpful, and mentors that will help you walk out of all the patterns of pain that you're medicating with the addiction. I want to tell you, Binoy, I see couples, they don't have the same relationship after pornography in recovery. They have a better one. They have something that was better than if they ever had gone through this deep, dark trial. And it is exciting. It is special. And I would love to continue to talk to people about that. I think that's a whole other webinar in and of itself is recovery. People feel at their lowest point when they're starting. But as hope builds, there are new things that come online as you begin to get new habits in place. You meet legitimate needs in legitimate ways rather than meeting legitimate needs in the illegitimate ways that have been happening with the pornography use. There's hope on the other side of this.
Jeremy, I think just to build on that, and just, I know we got to sign off here, but I think what it's helpful for people to understand is people look at the pornography use as the main problem, and I think what we see is that pornography often is what we might call it the tip of the iceberg. It's the part we see. It's the very visible problem that is before us, but 90% of the problem is really beneath the surface. And so when people go to get that help from counselors and therapists and professionals, they're able to get to that underlying core causes that have led people to the pornography and to medicate those emotional needs. Yeah. And I think that's the part that is hopeful, is that you can actually fix what's broken deep down in the emotional level, in this, even the spiritual level for people, and then you can rebuild both your own personal life and your marriage on a much stronger foundation of health and trust and safety.
It takes time and commitment to recover from, but it is worth it. And I will tell you that There may be stumbles along the way, but as long as we're stumbling forward with help,
Right.
boy, I see a lot of great stories. And I do encourage people to keep looking up and taking notes on the articles we've put on the screen because there's so much more I'm passionate about sharing that we don't have time to just yet, but these resources will get into them.
Well, I don't think I could have ended with a better note. Thank you both, Daniel and Jeremy. That was a terrific webinar, and we thank all of you who have stayed on till the end. We have, just for your information again, recorded this entire webinar so that you can, again, re-watch the entire content, share it with friends, families. It will be emailed to you based on the email that you registered. You should expect that in a couple of days. But again, everything is recorded so you can revisit everything. Daniel and Jeremy, thank you so much. Your expertise.
Well, thank you for having us, Vino. We surely appreciated it.
And our organizations would love to hear from the individuals out there in ways that we can serve them, speak with them on our phone lines, or provide feedback on our website. Brushfiresfoundation.org for Daniel, family.org for Focus on the Family. We'd love to continue this conversation with folks in the audience. I hope we've made some friends out there today.
You certainly have, and the thank yous and the kind notes are coming in. Thank you all for attending. This webinar is now officially closed. We're sorry we couldn't answer all the questions, but hope you got the major meat that was provided by Jeremy and Daniel. Thank you again, and look forward to the next webinar coming in through your inbox. Take care. Have a great day.
Thank you.